Your Grace, Reverend Fathers, ladies and gentlemen, members and friends, the movies you are about to see were made by amateur photographers who had not the skill or the capital of Hollywood. They are shown to you tonight as an experiment to see your reaction and to determine if there is enough interest to take this material, rephotograph it, add a soundtrack, and then preserve it as a lasting documentary in the archives of our church. It also poses the possibility of making cassettes for home television viewing. But, however the case may be, we now show you these home movies in the hope that you will enjoy them as something recreating the past memories you may have experienced here at your church in earlier times. For those of you who were not here at the time that this cathedral was built, we hope that you will see how much sacrifice and work went into the making of this edifice. Thank you for being here to preview this documentary which we have assembled thus far. World War II was responsible for a tremendous growth and expansion of industry on the West Coast. The old Jedinstvo Hall, which, as you know, is no longer there. Yet, here is where the first members of the St. Steven's new church parish held their first meetings. What we are seeing now is the signing of the Articles of Incorporation. The signers were Stojan Radoš, Šćepan Kralj, Lazar Samardžić, Vaso Kurilić, Todor Polić, Vido Kovačević, Visto Bašić, Nicholas Bašić, Arsen Milošević, Steve Grubačić, and Peter Janicic. I was there with them, as you can see. This is the Church of St. James Episcopal Church in South Pasadena. Here is where we had our first Easter service. Also, the church was very kind to lend us their auditorium. That door there leads to the auditorium, which we used for our Sunday worship services until we finally built this hall, which had a chapel in it. This is the American Legion Hall in South Pasadena, where we held our first Easter banquet. This was all back in 1948. Don't you wish you had these classic cars now? Our next problem was to find suitable land for the building of our church project. Finally, after a lot of looking around, Vito Kovacevic and I found this place here on 2511 West Garvey. Here we see Vito showing the land to Risto Basic and of course the surroundings. At the time we bought this land, we had 5 acres here. There was a difference in elevation of some 90 feet, which, thanks to the land moving and land leveling project, which was undertaken by all the Serbian contractors working together, we were able to smooth it out and put it all on one level. This used to be a horse barn down below us on Fremont. That now is the site of the St. Thomas More Roman Catholic Church. If you remember, that's the motel that we finally purchased a few years ago. This is Stepan Kral on one of his tours of inspection. I don't remember if it was winter or summer. By the way, we paid $60,000 for the 5 acres. This was the beginning of the land leveling project. And I think that we had a piece of machinery from every Serbian contractor in the area. As I said before, this was the first time they all got together. This entire work of grading and preparing the land for the consequent building was all donated by these Serbian gentlemen. That was Draža there, and we had visitors from Chicago, my mother-in-law and my sister-in-law, Kosa and Dorothy Vujovic. That was Krista Nikčević there also. Yes, that is Popadija Besi. After leveling the land out, we started to work on the retaining wall, which runs down alongside Crestline Terrace on the north side. This is the material being readied for the retaining wall. At this time, I was spending most of my time as the timekeeper, bookkeeper, and materials procurer. Vito didn't like my tie that day. For building the retaining wall, we got all the sand and gravel and cement donated, and all that was mixed in one of the mixers run by Miloš Petrovic right here on the grounds. That's the mixer. It looked like an antique in those days. I wonder what it looks like today. The forms for the retaining wall are being placed. This project was under the chairmanship of Vido Kovacevic and the building committee at that time. And now we are getting ready to build the hall. Most of the material was donated by the various suppliers that worked with our Serbian contractors in the area. The sketch for the hall, we prepared two sketches. One was prepared by Risto Basic and the other by Vido Kovacevic and myself. And since Vido and I included a chapel in the plans, most of the people at the special meeting which was called to approve the plans liked Vido's plan. That one was accepted, and then we had the architect draw up the plans and specifications. We started to build the hall on the day after St. Sava, January 28th, 1949. Starting on the walls to build the forms necessary, of course, to hold the concrete when it's poured. White that you see in that form is actually the plaster of Paris, which was used to make up the waste molds. Waste molds were used to create intricate designs, or gingerbread as we call it, up around the eaves. And after the concrete had been poured into these waste molds, then the plaster was chipped away. And of course the concrete in a decorative design was left. I hope that you have the feeling like you're there, that you're actually seeing how all this was done. We had to cut some of the film out because Vido Kovacevic wanted to record almost every nail being driven in. And so we had to cut it a little bit, because otherwise I'm sure you would have been bored stiff looking at all this construction going on. This is one of our Saturday volunteer working bees. The membership used to come and help clean lumber, clean the premises, take off the forms, and so forth. We see Peter Janisch there. Almost every Saturday, we had these working bees here. Our good ladies would come and prepare some lunch, and of course the men would help with the work. That's our chef en croix with the Nikolic sisters. And this is the first meeting that we had in the hall without a roof. The walls were up, but there was no roof on the hall. And there's our first president, Jovo M.Mrvichin. And I imagine you'll recognize many of these who are here now. There's our Bernice Bassich. She was the first president of the Women's Auxiliary. And that's the first gavel. Wall was ground, stoned, and sacked after the forms were removed in order to give it a smooth texture. Can you imagine going over this entire structure by hand with a stone, the kind of a stone that you sharpen a knife on or whatever, a little more coarser, and then filling in the pores with a kind of a concrete paint, and then wiping it with a sack. These are the girders that will go up to make up the understructure for the roof. These girders were all manufactured by United Concrete Pipe. That was Steve Rubasich there, smiling at us all. These trusses were placed 4 feet apart. On top of the steel trusses, we had these 2x6 tongue and groove boards placed. On top of these boards, the tar paper was placed, and also the thing was mopped with hot tar. And then the mission tile, all donated by Vladimir McBean, was placed on there, was tied and nailed. About this time, we ran out of money. There wasn't enough money to complete the structure, and the big question was, what do we do now? Do we board it up and go out campaigning, or do something else? We called a special meeting of the Board of Trustees, which had been increased from 11 to 21 members, and after a lot of haggling, we raised $60,000. All of the members loaning the money. So in all we had $60,000, and that was enough to start work again and to complete the building. The line is being dug by Milo, Roy, and George Pizzula. The picture that you see now is all that we have, a fragment of building the foundation for the parish house. At that time, some people didn't think that the parish house should be built here. So we had to really hurry up and put that foundation in as a kind of a convincing argument. Well, the foundation is there, so we might as well build it. And we, one day we took all of the workers, all of the carpenters, and put them over on the site of the parish house in order to get that foundation built. In fact, we were in such a big hurry that we didn't have people around to tie the steel. So the steel in that foundation was tied by Mr. Milic, by Drago Djajic, and myself. And now we're getting ready to dedicate the hall.
Jako sviat jesi Bože naš i Tebe slavu silaje. Otcu i Sinu i Svijatom.
This was October 9th, 1949. when the hall was dedicated, Vido Kovacevic and Risto Basic were the kumovi, and the same day, the cornerstone of the cathedral was placed and blessed, and also the rectory foundation was blessed. These are the people and the children that were, some of them who were present on this day. For about 3 years, that hall with the chapel and what is now the North Hall served our social and religious needs. And we had quite a few weddings and baptisms and also funerals in the North Hall. We're going to show you now one of the weddings that were held in the North Hall. That is, the religious ceremony was there. That was the wedding of Sam Pavlovich and Prosida Kurilic on May 28, 1950. Don't hear the choir, but there was one there under the direction of George Milan Radakovic. whoever took this film liked shoes.
Cvjetaj cvijeće, listaj goro, cvjetaj cvijeće, Crna Gora u boj kreće, Crna Gora u boj kreće.
U boj kreće, Crna Gora, u boj kreće.
Oj svijetla majska zoro, oj svijetla majska zoro, majko naša Crna Goro, majko naša Crna Goro.
Crna Goro, majko naša, Crna Goro.
You remember, the church hall was completed and dedicated on October the 9th, 1949. At the same time, the cornerstone and the foundation of the cathedral and parish house were also consecrated. Building the hall took all the funds at our disposal. The two foundations of the church and house were put in just to remind us that the job was not completed with the erection of the hall. There were people who thought that maybe putting a cross on the hall would be enough, and that these foundations should be destroyed and taken out. Luckily, most of us thought otherwise. Finally, toward the end of 1951, Božidar Ukropina decided that United Concrete Pipe Company could give a substantial donation to get the building of the church started. With his two partners, Steve Kroll and Todor Polic, the firm contributed $80,000. We immediately resumed building the church. My design of the future St. Stephen's Cathedral had been completed in 1948, approved by the Board of Trustees in regard to size and cost. and given to architects Quentin and Westberg, who were commissioned to make up the necessary plans and specifications. The building committee, under the chairmanship of Stefan Krau, and made up of Vido Kovacevic, Milo Dimkic, Bob Vlacic, Todor Polic, Stojan Radoš, was in charge of the actual construction. Roy Stoniker was hired to be the supervisor. Here you see the cathedral on its way with the walls up, that is the forms, almost completed and waiting for the day when it would be pouring day, or when the concrete would be poured into the forms. These gentlemen are carpenters, are placing the forms around the would-be columns in the church. Chikanole Perovic, who used to help out with the caretaking. Chikanole had been a captain in the regular Yugoslav army and later ended up as a chetnik. The concrete that went into those side columns was almost dry. We wanted to make that concrete as hard as possible. And even today, if you take your finger and say your knuckle and you pound against it, it almost rings like it was steel. We could barely push the concrete in among the steel bars. That's how heavy that thing was constructed. Stefan Krau and Vido Kovacevic, that was Popadija Besi and I. Since I designed St.Steven's Cathedral, I can tell you that it is one of a kind. It is not a copy, but an original composition of 12th and 13th century motifs of Byzantine and Romanesque architecture. These motifs I took from the churches and monasteries, for example, Dečani, Studenica, the King's Church on Oplanac, George's columns in Ras, Mileševo, Sopoćani, and Kalanić. Not only that, but our congregation selected the name of a Serbian saint as its patron, St.Steven, the first crowned king of Serbia, and also the senior brother of our Saint Sava. This is the only church, or I should say parish church, in the world dedicated to St. Stephen, Simeon, the first crowned king. We are now pouring the walls. This was supposed to be a one-pour job. Well, some of our members got a little jittery and stopped the pour midway. That created a cold joint, which can still be seen at times. Anyway, we continued pouring, and it seemed like we'd never reach the top, but we made it. Rade Grkovac and Vladimir, Vaso Kurilic, Chika Ilija Malovrazic. He's on his way to get a case of drinks or something out of his car. He always brought lunch, not only for the workers, but the visitors. Stepan Pijula. Concrete was mixed by the Graham Company. Although all the ingredients had been donated, we felt that it would be a lot easier to have the concrete mixed in the Graham plant and brought here in regular concrete mixing trucks. Here we see Vaso Kurilic and Milašin Milosavljević. Milašin was the caretaker. Here's another one of those Saturday working bees. Jelena Mikić and Rade Grkovac, Nikola Popović, Vlado Milić. This is Blue Eyes. We're now starting to form the central dome, and we'll probably be forming the front bell tower as well. There's Vlado Milić and Staniker. Vido changed hats, it looks like. These are the dome covers which were built by United Concrete Pipe and donated, of course, out of steel. Getting ready to take the roof trusses up and put them in place. These roof trusses were made and donated by Pacific State Steel. Milo Spike was in charge of that company at that time. Unfortunately, even before the church was completed, Milo Spike was killed in an unfortunate hunting accident. There's Stepan Pijula. Steve Kroll and I watching the work going on. I don't know what M.Mrvichin is mumbling about, but that dog you see there, that's Johnny. That was the guard dog on the premises. After this lumber was all stripped away from the concrete pour, it was saved, and the parish house was built from all this lumber that was left over from the church. That's why that house is so solid now, because it was built of all seasoned lumber. Unfortunately, in building that house, we didn't have enough 2x4s to go around, so we used 4x4s. That was one of the problems we had throughout this entire building project. They always thought that the architect and the engineer didn't specify enough strength. So instead of pouring a beam of concrete, we'll say, say 12 inches by 24, they always poured it double that size. Where the specification says to use a 5-sack mix, they used 7 sacks. Waste molds made out of plaster of Paris were used to create the valence-like design under the eaves of the roof. At one time we were thinking of putting red tile in those inserts, but then we figured that the church looked pretty enough without the red in it. Building the forms for the central dome and also for the bell tower. M.Mrvichin. A working crew assembled on a Saturday. George Samardzic, Steve Pijula, Mark Darkovic, Vlado Milic, Nikola Popovic, and others. You can see that we had a lot of open spaces in those days around us. I remember across the street we used to have a flock of sheep. Here we are getting ready to hoist these dome covers up to the domes and to put them in place. The dome covers would then later be covered with gunite, which is a form of concrete, and the tiling, ceramic tile, laid on top of the gunite in the form of a Serbian flag and gold crosses. Exciting day to see those dome covers placed. crosses were first blessed down on the ground, and then they were hoisted up by the crane and placed on top of the domes. Crosses have a special significance. We know that the cross stands for the life and work of our Lord Jesus Christ, but the sphere down below symbolizes the world. So it is the influence of our Lord and Savior that covers the entire world, is what we are trying to say with this symbolism. Here we're applying the tile in the form of the Serbian flag colors. And so we are now pouring the porches, which will be finished in red brick. The brick was also donated by Vladimir. And this is the day when the cathedral was consecrated. October 5, 1952. Lazar Samardzic and Stoyan Radoš were chosen to be the kumovi. This is the procession which is coming from the chapel in the North Hall toward the cathedral. We had 3 bishops and 12 priests. Here we're going around the church now.
See
sure you will recognize most of them. I was the master of ceremonies, and I'll tell you, I was real happy when that day was over. There we see Konstantin Fotic, the former ambassador from Yugoslavia to the United States, and our venerable bishops, clergy, and our various dignitaries. This is Kata Parker entertaining us with her song. Bishop Anthony giving us his blessing and his speech. Brother Vito Kovacevic. Here's Teddy Price entertaining us at the piano. Father John and his father Nikolai, and these are priests of the Russian, Romanian church from Los Angeles. Yeah, from Bisbee too. That's my father, Prota Milan. Konstantin Fotic, speaking now. And I believe this was the choir from San Francisco, Oakland. It looked a little different in those days. Rajko Lubanja taking a bow. Mihailo Ducic now coming up. He was the president of the Serb National Defense at that time and a great friend. This is His Grace Bishop Nikolai Velimirovic. Of the occasion, Bishop Nikolai gave us that triptych of 3 icons. In 1955, we continued our building program and built the church rectory. In 1964, we completed the building of the church school with diocesan offices. His Grace Bishop Gregory, our new bishop then, consecrated the new building. And then, of course, in 1976, we purchased the motel, which was next door, and built the pavilion. I think that 35 years of organizing and building and constructing has really created a unique situation and a wonderful organization that we can all be proud of. And now we bring you to today, 1982. This is the final result from that beginning 35 years ago. this wonderful property that we have came from some very humble beginnings, from a lot of work and sacrifice. And we hope that we who are still here today and the generations of tomorrow will continue to preserve and to expand the wonderful property that was started by our fathers and which has perpetuated the Holy Orthodox faith among us, their children.